Okay, right, so you've made quite a big improvement, yeah? Definitely, I would say in the last hour from driving around here, you've made quite a big improvement, yeah? But we just need to have a look at what's happening and how you can improve further and how the bus behaves, yeah? I said to you yesterday, when you drive a bus, you're sitting outside the wheelbase. So unlike a car, which has the wheels at the four corners, and your head is more or less always in the center of the wheelbase, yeah? Your head is about here, yeah? So you've got half the car in front of you and half the car behind you. In a bus it's very different. You're sitting right outside the wheelbase and your head's about here. So when you turn, what happens is the bus tends to pivot around the back wheels, yeah? And what happens is when you turn, the back end tends to swing out, yeah? So if you're turning to the left, the back of the bus tends to swing out. That's called negative swing, yeah? I call it tail swing. And the front tends to sweep quite wide. So if you imagine, if you're making a left turn here, right, the tyres are going to take this line, yeah? And that's fine. But the swept area, the swept path of the bus is going to look more like this. Because when you turn, the back end is going to flick out and the front end is going to sweep wide, yeah? This front corner is going to sweep quite wide, yeah? And the back wheels here are going to cut in, yeah? So you've got the negative swing here, you've got the front sweeping wide, and you've got the back cutting in, yeah? Three things that you have to be checking, which is why I say to you when you're turning, keep scanning the mirrors. Because you could go wrong here. You could get the front of the vehicle too wide and hit something there. You could turn in too much and hit the curb on the left. And while you're looking at those two things, if you're not watching the back right hand side, the back could swing out. This is much worse for coach drivers. Coach drivers that have rear wheel steering, yeah, some of these coaches are 15 meters long and they've got rear wheel steering. Situations that we can get through in this bus, the coaches will never get through, because when they turn, that rear wheel steering pushes the back end right out. And if you ever drive a coach, you'll see what I mean, yeah? It's deadly. They're very, very experienced coach drivers that have had accidents where they've wiped out bus stops or wiped out railings because they thought they had enough room, but as they turn, the rear wheel steering pushes the back of the coach out. Yeah, it's very, very dangerous. So you've got to understand that. Now, aside from that, aside from the sweep, the swing, and the pivot, yeah, what you've got to understand is, and this is again where, unless you've driven one of these vehicles or you've only driven cars, you won't understand this initially. When we steer, there is a delay with the steering. So for example, if the back wheels are here, yeah, and if the curb is here, if you steer to the left now, obviously the back wheels are going to go over the curb, yeah? So what we have to do is we have to go forwards until the back wheels are more or less at the curb, yeah? Now, exactly when to steer depends on how much room you have here. If you've got maybe about 1 meter, then you could steer from this point, yeah? If, however, you're a lot closer to the curb, yeah, now if you steer, you're going to hit the curb straight away, yeah? So it depends on how much room you have. And that's where we have to learn to create space, yeah? People call it defensive driving, I call it creative driving, because what you're doing is you're creating safe situations, you're creating safe zones, and how you position the bus here could depend on whether you're going to hit the curb or not, because you create the space to turn left, yeah? Sometimes it might mean you have to straddle at tight junctions, and that's where Abdi was driving this morning. I said to him, look at that left turn in Brentford. I would have just stayed in the centre and straddled, because you brought the bus to the left, you brought the bus near the curb, yeah? So it's important to realise, if you're flying an aircraft, right, this is called the yaw axis, yeah? The plane's got wings on it, yeah? When the plane turns left and right, it tends to yaw, yeah? If you learn to fly a plane, you've got to learn to control the plane in 4 different dimensions, yeah? With a bus, you've only got to worry about 2 things. Steering, in terms of left and right, and accelerating, slowing down and speeding up, yeah? But as I just said to you, in the yaw axis, when you turn, there is a delay. However, when it comes to accelerating and braking, yeah, in acceleration braking, this is called the longitudinal axis, yeah, you actually have to do things earlier. And this is where there's a contradiction, a conflict, because you have to learn to steer later, but you have to be on the gas and on the brakes earlier. So it's almost like you're being stretched in two different directions. When it comes to steering, you steer later. When it comes to seeing things and braking and accelerating, you do that earlier. So this is why it takes time to get the hang of this, yeah? So understand that if I'm saying to you, right, steer late, that doesn't mean say you brake late. It means you have to brake earlier to get the speed down and then steer, yeah? So there's a little contradiction there, yeah? You're juggling different things. You're juggling the steering, you're juggling the pedals, you're juggling the mirrors, you're juggling the planning, you're juggling, what else are you juggling? It's 5 things, but I can't remember the 5th one. But you're basically juggling all these things, yeah? And what tends to happen is sometimes when you get overloaded, you drop one thing. While you're concentrating on what's coming towards you, sometimes what you're doing is you're allowing the bus to fall onto the curb. You're losing your position and you're letting the bus get too close to the curb, yeah? There is a little bit of camber on the road, so it'll pull the bus to the left anyway, but you're letting the bus fall to the left while you're seeing the vehicle coming towards you. So don't drop that, yeah? Sometimes when you're going through a tight gap, I can see you checking, and what's happening is while you're looking, your foot is glued to the gas pedal and the bus is picking up too much speed. So that's where you need to ease off, yeah? There is something called cross-coupling, and cross-coupling is when you're doing one thing and it affects something else, yeah? I'll explain more about that later, but there is a little bit of cross-coupling going on. When you're looking at something intently, you don't realise that your foot is stuck to the gas pedal, you're not releasing the gas pedal, yeah? So you need to understand that as well. Now, when you were driving there, I was telling you about holding the gears, yeah? What you've got to realise is, just like sometimes I tell you I want you to hold your position, so if you're coming up to a meeting situation and the car ahead is far away, yeah? I'll draw this out. So, for example, there might be a gap here, yeah? Now you're more or less here, right? And you're closer, and there's a car coming from here, yeah? Now you're both doing more or less the same speed. What I want you to do in this situation is hold your position because you'll get through first, yeah? That car will wait for you, yeah? You've got to look at their speed. If they're coming much faster or they're much closer, the car's here, then I would probably say that car's going to come through first. You'll have to wait, yeah? And when I want you to wait, I don't want you necessarily to stop, because stopping is very inefficient. What I want you to do is see what's happening, slow the bus down to a crawl, keep checking your mirrors and just crawl. So as this car passes, you go in there, yeah? It's more efficient. But at the same time, as much as I want you to hold your position, there are some times when I want you to hold the gear. And what's happening, for example, is when you're coming up to a tight gap, as I said to you, you're looking at the gap, right? And the engine is at the point where it just about wants to change gear. The engine revs are quite high. And because you're concentrating on this gap, you're not realising your foot is on the gas and the bus changes into the next gear. Now we have a problem, because if any of these car doors open, we're going to hit the doors. We can't stop, yeah? So remember, hold the position and try and hold the gear. Listen to the engine, feel what the bus is doing, yeah? Yeah, and we spoke about the driving line. You watch my videos about the driving line, yeah? As much as possible, try and keep to the driving line. If you have to move a little bit left to help oncoming traffic, get the driving line back. If you have to move a little bit right to overtake a parked vehicle, get the driving line back, yeah? So you're always getting back on the driving line. And as I said to you, it's in the same way when you're slowing down or speeding up. Once you've slowed down, get back up to speed. Once you've got up to speed, hold the speed, yeah? The hardest thing to do is to drive the bus absolutely straight at a steady speed, because the bus will naturally want to wander left or right. It'll get pulled with the camber of the road. You haven't experienced any wind yet, but when it's windy, the bus catches the wind like a big sail. It'll get pushed around, yeah? It's like a sail. So the hardest thing to do is hold the bus straight and to hold the driving line. And apart from that, try and hold the gear and hold your speed steady, yeah? It's funny because when you learn to drive a bus, when you watch these guys driving, you think the art is steering around tight corners and, you know, lots of steering and left and right and avoiding curbs. The hardest thing to do is keep it straight and keep the driving line. Yeah, because drivers will naturally always wander. The bus will want to wander. Yeah. Okay.